So this is, you know, this is a question that I think I get a lot. So for those that don't know, I'm a sports doctor and my big research area is on youth athlete and youth athlete development. And, part of it's injury risk, but part of it's really you can't talk about it unless you're talking about athlete development. So, I help at every level, professional, college, high school, junior athletes, and you name it. And so I have that perspective. But this is, and I actually do a lot with tennis as well too. But Chris actually has an even better perspective. I mean, he was played football at Marshall University, and actually, how many NFL teams do you play for?
So four in total. I had a stint in Miami. We just went on vacation to the beach. That was a quick one, quick couple months. But really,
Yes.
four in total, but I would say three really where I spent a fair amount of time over 12 seasons.
Um, yeah, and so he understands that aspect of really becoming an elite athlete. There's people coming in now, you might see, and he understands what elite athlete development is, but he may be understanding it even more because he's the dad of two young daughters as well, who are pretty darn good athletes. And um, he and I have had a lot of conversations, and it really actually kind of gets to the point of what we're trying to do today is like what do you do? When is it time to start telling your kids that, hey, I think you might be pretty good. Let's move on to the next level. Chris and I share a lot, things. I mean, obviously you can see this picture here. I know he had to fight off girls all through, high school and college, just like I did. I just couldn't go anywhere without someone trying to, take a picture with me. And so we definitely share a lot in our athleticism. It's probably, like I dominated a lot of non-contact flag football in seventh grade, and we share a lot. So um, for those that don't know, we do encourage kids to play a lot of sports when they're young. So part of our pickup sports model is actually that free play, have fun, and try to introduce as many sports as possible. And we're all in for that model. But we do, and that's on the left here. These are our kids and a bunch of other kids and high school athletes that kind of mentor them and organize them. But we do work with a lot of athletes who become quite good. And so I think you got to look at both areas, and that's probably about 10%. And so, I want to first introduce Chris, just formally, I guess we're kind of informally talking here, but Chris, thank you so much. And just to not even, Chris is an amazing athlete, but his wife also played college basketball at Marshall University as well, too. So not to be,
It's
it's
not just my DNA,
not just
right?
you. Yeah, it's pretty healthy genetics there for their kids. So thank you, Chris, so much for joining us here
Yeah,
today.
thank you for having me, Doc. I really appreciate it. And so just to piggyback off of what Doc said, I had a lot of success as a junior athlete. And then, that carried over into collegiate athlete sports and then on to professional sports. And so and like you said, I wouldn't have considered myself a jock by any sorts. I've been my wife since I was 18, Doc. So I didn't really
Yeah,
have to fight
yeah.
off on girls. So I mean, I got lucky in that aspect, but we really, really went through this journey together, right? As junior athletes on to professional sports, and we have two lovely daughters, Sydney 12, and our youngest is 9. And so, it's completely different dealing with junior athletes who you just see have incredible ceilings, but it's unrealistic to expect them to attain the same success I had. But there's an opportunity. So there, like you said, Doc, when is it time to really turn it on and help them try to become elite athletes? I don't ever think we'll have a true answer to that question. But I think elite, when we talk about that word, I think we can use some defined measurables, because right, they're athletes, but we're talking about the one percenters of the one percenters. And I think, you have to use whether it's records of some sort or some scientific data, right? We're talking about world record holders, or if you're using tennis and we're looking at kids who have who attain junior grand slams. I think those are sort of the things that quantify elite. And you really can't until kids have reached some sort of measurable.
Yeah.
So that's my
It's a
two
great,
cents.
yeah. Yeah, it's a great. No, that was more than 2 cents. That was at least a quarter. That was good. That was good. Linda's joining us again, right? Linda, I think you've been with us before.
Yes, I was last time, and
Yeah.
thank you,
Yeah.
Lakshmi, for giving me access. Yep, happy to be
Yeah.
here.
Awesome. And she does great work. She really understands the issues well too. So I got some questions lined up for Chris. Some of them I'm gonna put on the spot and try to get something out of him. I'm trying to make him wiggle a little bit here if we can. But let's start with, with the young kids. Like, so, tell us about what you did when you were what we call pre-adolescence. When you
Oh
were,
man,
let's say, under 12. What was sports like for you? What did you do?
that's an easy answer. I think for me, it was mostly free play. It was just genuinely being exposed to all the different sports and having fun. And I think the cutoff, I wouldn't necessarily say it was 12, but I think at the end of middle school, where the defining moment was, are you going to continue playing recreational sport or are you going to play JV football? That was kind of really the defining moment between adolescent and sort of junior,
Oh,
sports for
yeah,
myself.
wait for that part. We got some more. So we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
like when you were a teeny tot. Yeah.
but I would say, yeah, that it was just all free play. I mean, it was just really experimental, having a lot of fun, and nothing other than that. That was really my experience as a child. I played every sport, and I had an opportunity to really just continue, whether it was football, basketball, or track. I had, a lot of success at all of those things, and just
Where'd
kept.
you play? Where'd you grow up? Do you play in parks? Where'd you play? Because those
So
have
so it was
changed.
mostly recreational sports, but the free play, I grew up in was really interesting, a cul-de-sac, and all of my neighbors, we all were boys, we were all the same age. We're still best friends to this day. And if someone had a basketball goal, then it was everyone's basketball goal. Someone had a football, it was everyone's football. And so I had an opportunity to experience all of these things as an adolescent with, the people who were just closest to me. And it's a little different these days. Kids, everyone's going to a different school and everyone has different schedules. But then, our school was actually in our community. And so, and by way of Virginia Beach is where I
Yeah.
grew up.
Yeah. So let me, Andrew, how old are your kids?
So I'm very early to this party. So my girls heard they'll soon be 4 and 2. So I'm like
Yeah, good for
very
you.
early in the process. Both
He's ready
both
to
me
go.
both me and my wife actually play college ball as well.
Yeah.
At the Division 2 level. But we're just like Chris was saying, we're exposing them to everything: gymnastics, basketball,
Yeah.
soccer, just running around in the field and everything like that. But yeah.
Yeah. So we have Lakshmi and I have 9, 11-year-olds. So we're all in the pre-adolescent. And then Geetha has, why don't you tell us what you have? It's a home full. What's he changing?
I'm still apparently don't get Zoom somehow, like 4 years later. Anyway, so I have a 10-year-old, a 12, almost 12-year-old, and a 6-year-old, all boys. And so I once upon a time asked the dumb question, what sport should my 5-year-old play? Like, what's the one sport he should play? What's the best one? And therefore they launched pickup sports based on my
The
ridiculous
question, yeah. Oh,
based on that ridiculous question. And so I've really taken their advice to heart and tried to let them do whatever they want. Like if they feel like trying squash, great. If they feel like, just we definitely are trying to. It's really hard to do the free play like that. I wish there was more opportunities for. I mean, I thankfully they go to a school that values recess, and so they have a lot of recess. They have a lot of like PE time at school, but otherwise it's like what you said. It's not the same like that. They can just like run down the street and find like 5 friends to play with. It doesn't really happen anymore. So
yeah.
wish
Because
there was wish there was more of that, but they're definitely exploring. So
Yeah, and what we see is that this is the changing culture. We have, we want to do those free play things, but all these kids have some organized sport activity, so they can't just go out and play. You can't just run down the street and go play because they're already at their practice or their game. So it makes it nearly impossible to do that. Lynn, did you have children that were playing sports?
I did. I'm older than all of you, and my kids are in their 20s. But interestingly, only one of them really wanted to play. The other was like so-so, and the third was violently opposed to sports. He's like wanted nothing to do with it. But now that they're young adults, they all run. And
Okay,
my husband and I are both runners, and I think for me that emphasizes the point that if you are the parent, if you are active yourself, you can keep your mouth shut. Not that we did, but you could, and they would try to emulate you because
Yeah.
you're modeling like an active life, and they could see it was important to us. So
Yeah.
it worked.
No, that's awesome. So, and so that's the last, big point for us. And what Lakshmi and I try to do is create free play opportunities. And we've talked to probably, a bunch of you about this, and it's actually working. I mean, kids want to do this. I mean, we didn't have a free play opportunity this weekend. Lakshmi get barraged by all these messages saying, but my kids want to play. What do I do now? So it's actually kind of neat to see. We're trying to create a demand that used to be there on its own organically, and now we just have to reintroduce a really simple concept. Just get a bunch of kids to play together for fun with not a lot of rules and not a lot of parents telling them what to do. All right. So I'm going to go on to, one of the things we talked, and you all talked about this, is athlete exposure versus athlete development. And so I guess at this stage, now we're going to kind of move on because you were just playing for fun when you're under 12, but now you start seeing, hey, look, I might actually want to get better, and that's okay. This is, one of my friends trying to get good at soccer, right? And this is what some of the kids out here do all week long. But so the question is, when you start working on getting better, we can go to middle adolescence, but like before that, like when you were, like under 12, were you working on getting better or were you just playing?
I was just playing. I think you develop a confidence through sport, and as you become more, as you become better at that sport, you sort of gravitate to where you have more success. And so I think, I played football, basketball, and ran track. And so, and I think you back then, it may be a little different now, but you had to decide between the seasons. And so, like you couldn't run track and play back. It was two sports that coincided, or three. And so you had to choose, right? And so I think when it got to that point, I'd kind of decided, okay, this is where I'm really good. And so let's sort of continue to track. I think the discovery at that point is over. You've sort of
Yeah.
figured out, okay, this is where I want to be. And you still experiment, you're not sort of being defined by one sport at that point, but you're starting to really work on the craft.
And let me ask you this, when you said you were doing free play, I'm just curious, you said you get a bunch of kids, like, did you just, what did you do? You literally just went to the park and said, today we're going to play football. And then
Yeah.
tomorrow, let's just go play basketball. Like, how'd you decide what to do and where? I remember doing this and we literally rode our bikes around and just found a group of kids and said, can we play?
I think we were for the most part, we were all on the same schedule, so I think that played a huge factor in, we just all decided, okay, let's play football. We play sideline pop, right? So, one of our friends had a huge backyard and that was our football field. And the other thing is that whomever sort of whoever had the equipment made the rules. So if it was my basketball, right? That's kind of how we decided, okay, the rules of the game. But, being able, deciding the game itself. I mean, we played, some days we played all the sports in the same day. So it was just being on the same schedule, which gave us the opportunity to do a lot of these things together. And I think that's really one of the determining factors today, right? All of our kids we have all these things and we're doing this and we don't even go to the same schools. So it's a little bit more difficult now than it
Yeah.
was.
A lot more difficult.
Yeah, a lot more.
I did in the 80s. You probably did this in the 90s, maybe.
No. So I'm an 80s kid. So I'm at 1980. You're not that old. You're not that much older than me, dog.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. No, I did in the 80s when were you born?
1980.
Oh yeah. So no, I was born in 72. So I mean you were
Oh,
probably better athlete in 1980 than I was. And
yeah, just a few years. Just a few years.
So all right, next question. So I got some old video from from your family, and this is Chris, in middle adolescence here. He was a good dancer. Look at that. And so so now you're into middle school basically, and entering high school. And then, did things change? You get into organized sport? Like what was that experience like? And again, you're coming from someone who had pretty good athletic abilities, but
Yeah,
did you start talking to you, or how did that one look?
I think in middle school, it was so prior to that, it was, like I said, recreational. And then as you get into middle school, you can be on the middle school teams. So it takes another level, another jump in sort of, I guess, seriousness. I don't know. We just are able to do something that every kid isn't going to get chosen to do. I think you get chosen, so you have to try out, and I think that really kind of takes it up a notch. And so, as a kid, I think as a middle school adolescence, you really start to understand how to develop a competitive spirit. I think that's probably one of the biggest differences going from just a discovery to, okay, I'm really good at this, to now, okay, it's about competing with other kids who are just as skilled. So I think that sort of defines that 12 to 15. You get chosen, right? You're pretty good. Um, and so you're sort of off to the rat race at that point.
Yeah, yeah, no, and so did you at that point feel like you were moving away from free play and getting organized sports, and did coaches ever talk about, hey, Chris, I think you could play college football? I think, or was it just like, again, you just kept playing and played on a team and didn't think that much farther ahead, like you
Yeah, I
might
think
today?
no one really thought that far ahead, because the difference then than now is that we didn't just choose one sport, right? I still played football, basketball, and track, but I played on the middle school team, right? So the free play was already, it's kind of, I moved past that, and I'm sort of defining myself as this, as an athlete, right? But I haven't really determined one sport. I think nowadays, these kids are all in on one sport at a very early age, and it doesn't give them opportunity, right, to fail at other things. And once you fail at that one thing and you're not doing something else, then your options are gone. So I still had a lot of options to play different sports, but just more organized.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
that
no,
makes sense.
um, and then like, as a mom, Geetha, you're there. Like, have you talked to your boys about what they want to play in? I mean, do they have middle school teams there and stuff, or because they do some travel stuff already, right?
Yeah, so they do. But in middle school, actually, at our school, they are required to play a different sport every season. So after school, part of middle school is actually a sport at the end of the day. And so which is nice, from 2:45 to 3:45 every day, they have to play a sport. And they level them. So like some kids do end up playing intramural, which is totally fine. Or they might play on you know, there's A, B, C in intramural. So they might end up playing on like C team, which is like slightly more competitive, or, and most sixth graders will end up either on the C or intramural. So I think it's a natural progression, which is nice. But, and I wouldn't really say travel is like actual travel. Like it's like traveling a half hour, and it's only, two practices a week. So
Yeah.
I think it's travel in the sense that you're paying a lot. And it's, it's and they're paying a coach, so it's not a like
Volunteer.
a parent coaching, like a parent volunteer, which I thought was also awesome when we were when we were doing that. But honestly, it's like it's kind of led by the boys. That's what they see their friends doing and that's what they want to do. And at this point, I'll let them do the travel because I don't think it is overly intense. But if it got to that point where it's like, um, you know, I don't see them having fun. I feel like, if I ever got to that point, I would probably just pull back and say, you have enough in middle school going on, like one sport, at one sport per season is reasonable. You don't have to be playing soccer. They do give like an optional break in the year for soccer, which is interesting because like I know that you're big on not playing year round and that makes much more sense to me. So I don't, I do think it's still borderline too intense. Well, I don't know about borderline. It's definitely too intense, but they still seem to enjoy it. So yeah.
Um, and actually, it's a really great point. There's small private schools, and I help with a few of them. They do. I love it. There's so many multi-sport athletes. They're not the best athletes, not necessarily, but they all do a different sport, and that's great. But the opposite is happening in public schools where you have less scholastic sports, you have less recess, less opportunity, and so Andrew, probably learned this, as his daughters get a little older, is that you come back to like they're barely playing any sports at school these days. And so where does that get filled in? Then it gets filled in either you do organized or there's like a dichotomy. So there's either kids playing a lot and they're organized or they're just not playing at all. And so, I think part of our mission is to try to get these kids who aren't playing that much also elevated. And then the kids are playing all the time in one sport to play a lot of different things until we get kind of to the next phase, which is maybe this phase is when someone like Chris becomes, now people know you're good. You've had some success. You're 16 or older. And what did coaches look at you like? Now did you start having some goals? Where did this take you from here? Like and when is it okay to do that? Like you say, I'm really working. I want to get in college. I see a path here.
I think it's different for every sport. I'll use football. Obviously, that was a sport I played. I don't think you can really, you can't really see that far ahead until, back when I was playing high school sports, you really didn't have the opportunity to earn a scholarship or really get looked at until you probably were a junior. Now it's completely different, and they're offering kids scholarships as a freshman. And so I think it's the trend is changing a little bit, but as you develop as an athlete, I think you start to separate yourself. And if you take, tennis, right? We know the kids who are going to get out early, the 12s, and we know the kids as they continue to go up the pyramid, right? That pool gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so you can generally see the kids who are probably going to have a lot of success. But then, there are oftentimes in other sports, take football, for instance, you can't really see that until they're almost men because, a kid can never go from high school to the NFL. It's just virtually impossible. So that pool doesn't shrink until it's almost time to get to the NFL. And then those kids, right, disperse. So I think every sport has sort of defining timeline. But I would say, if we're taking football, I think I didn't really get really serious about football until probably I was in college, because it's just too early to see. I think you take the most athletic kids in football, and for instance, right, I was the best quarterback, the best safety, the best wide receiver. I was the best skilled athlete on my team, but I touched the ball in so many different ways. And so I didn't necessarily have a position until I got to college. I was just an athlete, right? Nowadays, kids have a defined, hey, I'm a wide receiver and that's it, you know? And I'm saying that's crazy. How do you know you're going to be a wide receiver when you get to college? And so I think I had an opportunity to still explore and to try these different things, even though I was the most skilled on the team. So it's completely different. My really position wasn't defined until I got to college. And even so, I've seen some of the best wide receivers, excuse me, some of the best quarterbacks, Hines Ward, become one of the greatest wide receivers the NFL has ever seen. So even then, there's opportunity to evolve. So hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, it's funny because I think we talked about I helped with the NFL combines for about 18 years, and my first year was 2001, I think. And I think you came through what year?
Uh, 3, 03,
2003. Yeah. So I was I might have interviewed you. You never know.
maybe.
And then I remember Antoine Randall L. He was a phenomenal football. I mean, he's a
Phenomenal quarterback,
IU.
right?
Huh?
Phenomenal quarterback, Indiana University.
Yeah. And then he was an amazing athlete. And then he came
Exactly.
in as a wide receiver in the NFL. And I remember going in his in the interview, I said, where's your quarterback? And he was not happy to hear me say, like, well, you're a wide receiver now, because someone, told me he's not going to get drafted as a quarterback anymore. And he was
Yeah,
as good as an athlete as you can get. So yes.
yeah.
So you
He
don't know
went on
that.
to have a career.
Yeah. And Andrew, what sport did you play, by the way, in college?
Basketball.
Okay. Where at? You said D2 school, right?
Yeah, D2 Purdue Northwest. So
Yeah.
I'm from Indiana, actually, Northwest Indiana, right outside Chicago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're from Chicago originally. So I'm going to actually, you talked briefly about this, and I want to go this, and then we're going to talk about your daughters to kind of finish up, because we all have kids. We want to hear your thoughts too, and what you're doing with your daughters. But you gave your definition of elite level athlete, and I want to hear others as well too, because you gave a very narrow term for elite level, which is the best of the best, the 1% of the 1%, which is
Yes.
really interesting. And so, and I don't know what the right answer is. I don't, or high performance, but especially in tennis and other sports, like that term is used ubiquitously, our elite athlete program and blah, blah, and all these things. And
Mhm.
so, I might use a different term, but you have a high bar. So, Linda, maybe I'll start with you. What would you say is an elite athlete or high performance athlete?
Hmm. Well, I don't really think you can be an elite athlete in high school. I mean, I think it almost by definition and suggest you have to be at least in college to be elite, with maybe, some few exceptions in those sports where they develop really young. But it is, funny, like elite is the term that's thrown around constantly for, and in my view, to get parents to think that if you send your child here, they'll become elite, whatever that means. It's very vague. In running, there is an elite standard. And I don't really know exactly, except that I would say you can't be an elite athlete when you are younger than college. Maybe high performance, but not elite.
Yeah, and so you make a distinction there. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, interesting. Andrew, what about you? You and your wife play college athletic, you guys are both college athletes. What would you say? High performance, elite, like when do you distinguish?
I would say, I mean, just growing up, I mean, receiving those accolades like through AAU or through different sports that you might participate in, getting those awards in high school at the high school level, being one of the elite in your local area, or at a national level if you're getting national recognition. I think those are that's at that time period is when you can consider what's elite. And like nowadays you are seeing like people getting like scholarship offers in middle school at times and things like that. So I mean, yes, it's all subjective, I think, but yeah, whenever you're starting to get that recognition locally and nationally, I think that's when you're considered an elite athlete at that point.
Yeah, it's interesting. Lakshmi actually, and Lakshmi doesn't want to brag, but she actually has quite a strong athletic background. No, she she does have good athletic genes, but she has used her skills in a lot of ways. But actually, we've never talked about that. What do you think? Like we actually have one kid who is actually pretty skilled. I use the term he's skilled and motivated. But what would you
Yeah.
say when you define it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I lean more towards what Linda is saying, like until you're reaching that point, because these kids they can switch to elite at any age. Like you can develop late and be, you know, an 18-year-old and all of a sudden you've become elite. So it's really reaching that point where yeah, you've kind of getting the recognition and accolades. Like, I mean, Andrew, it's kind of a combination of everything now that I'm really thinking about it. Like you're getting accolades and you're getting recognition. So you could be elite at a young age, but then it dies off, right? Like they burn out. And then, so at one point now you were elite, or you become elite later in life. So it is very
Yeah, it's
evolving, right?
interesting. I spoke at the UST annual meeting and I talked about, because there's actually an acceptable term in tennis called high performance programs. Like Chris, your daughters play tennis, and you know that, you know, they're in a high performance program. And actually a woman raised her hand and said, isn't every kid a high performance athlete? I mean, every kid is, if you think about it, they're performing their highest. So it's really, it's how you phrase it. But yet you're right on, Linda. Look at everyone here. I think it's like the top 10%. I think that it's about 1 out of 10 who are resilient and who perform at a much, you know, better level than others. I don't think you can assess anyone before at least some adolescent pathway. At least there's hormones that got to kick in to really say you're at least at that level. But I will say that, you know, having been around this for a long time, you can identify, you know, that top 10%, you know, you can begin to identify them in some sports, like Chris said, during that adolescent phase and then beyond. You can identify tennis is one of those, but gymnastics and swim dive, maybe some where they peak a little bit early, but you can't identify. But it's interesting how, I mean, we all have friends and neighbors. We have neighbors who they were told their kid he's top level and join our travel soccer and everything when he was 8, and it took him what, 1 season or 2 seasons, and now his mom is like, I'm never gonna drive him again. And he's done with sports altogether. Like,
Yeah, they just gave everything up. Yeah.
yeah, they paid the big check and everything because they said, well, he's elite, you know. So it's a marketing technique, right? So we have to be really cautious of the marketing techniques to say that your kid is at least before they have hormones. Like really even say they're gonna have a takeoff and actually their body's gonna change, you know, so significantly. So now I want to go to you know, to your daughters, you know, Chris, and I think all of us can listen. You know, he has 2 really, you know, really skilled junior tennis players, you know, 12 and 10, right? You know, she's 9, right? And, you know, we've had some conversations about it and their trajectory, and he knows some of the data that the most, and this is good news for you, Andrew, the most likely people to get college scholarships are those that have a parent or first degree relative who played college or professional sports. And so you guys are good, you know, for Etha, Lakshmi, and I, we're gonna make sure we got some backup plans.
Well, it is, yep.
But so tell us a little bit about what expectations, you know, first of all, that your parents had on your career, and then what your expectations are for your daughters.
So a little bit about my background. So I grew up in a household, single family household of 4 kids, and we're all 4 years apart. So we were at different stages, you know, throughout adolescence. My older sister is 8 years older than me, brother's 4 years, and then I have a younger sister who's 4 years younger. And so my mother's her only goal is education. You know, she just wanted us to get a better education and go off to college and get some sort of financial assistance. And we all did our own thing. My sister, both of my sisters were in the performing arts. And my brother kind of dabbled in football, but he ended up being a track athlete. And he went to college just on his smart. So that we're all college educated and have had our own success. But as it relates to expectations, there were no expectations when it came to sport because I was the only one, you know, and it was like no one had ever done anything. You know, it's just my mother knew nothing about sports. And still to this day, I mean, she would go to football games and she's just socializing and she doesn't know anything that's going on in the game. You know, she's just so clueless. And I think that was really stress-free, you know, for me, because it was like no one really cared. You know, my mom wanted me to have success, but she didn't know how to quantify success. She didn't know what that looked like. So as I'm, getting all these awards and getting all this recognition, it's great, but she's not like looking towards the next thing. Okay, well, he needs to like get this, he needs to do that. So it was still, the low expectations uh as it pertains to me. And so it was really cool when I look back at it now.
Yeah,
Now,
and not to interrupt, I totally, I'm sure, I don't know what your mom said when you got, selected to get in the NFL and stuff like that, but my dad didn't even show up. He was mowing the lawn when I won high school sectionals. It was
yeah,
pretty, it's not
but,
the same as the NFL.
but she
No,
was
but
present,
he literally didn't even come. He didn't even say anything.
but
He
I
didn't
will say
mow the lawn.
my mom found time to be present. I mean, she showed up at every game, not knowing what was going on,
Right.
but she was there. She was there. And I tell this
Yeah.
one story. Back then in junior high school, um, there were no ambulances at the games. Now this is early 90s, okay? There were no ambulances, and I happened to break my leg in the game.
Oh,
And
wow.
and so I fractured my tibia. And so my mom drove her minivan right onto the football field, and they picked me
Oh my,
up, put me in the back, and she drove me to the hospital. That's a true story.
oh
That's
my
a
God.
that's a true story. And so it was just so different back then. Now, obviously, now there's paramedics and ambulances at every game. But like I said, she was literally there every step of the way.
Actually, Chris, there's not anymore. After COVID, it's actually even here in Johns Creek in
Uh,
Georgia, which is the highest per capita in all of Georgia. We can't, even if we have money, the ambulances became they're very short. So we're back to where we don't have, we have to call 911. They send a paramedic, we have a relationship who will just sit there. They have just a quicker way to call 911. They
oh
just wait.
wow.
But yeah, we're
I didn't
back to
realize
the
I didn't
shortage.
realize that, but I don't have kids who play high impact sports, so
Yeah.
not necessarily involved in those sports. But now, as it relates to my children,
Yeah.
um, the expectations are a little higher because I tend to try to make them understand that even if they don't have success, right, you're gonna commit. So, if you want to play, okay, we're gonna play and we're gonna like see this through this season or whatever it is, right? And I think not really giving them opportunity to quit does, add an expectation. Now, I don't expect them to, like I said, go out and have success, but I do expect them to try hard and to put their best foot forward. Now, I've had an opportunity to touch every facet as it relates to football, whether it's coaching, being a player, and as an official. And so, what I tell my children is that that's giving me a unique eye when I look at sports because I never yelled or never would, yell at someone who I didn't think could do it. And I don't take that stance anyway, but I try to tell them that because, as coaches and as their teammates and parents, as they sort of help you grow in the sport that you decide to play, you have to understand that if someone never tells you something or never expects you to do anything, they don't think you can anyway. And so I try to use that as sort of a catalyst that, hey, use it as encouraging when your coach is trying to give you an instruction, because if he didn't think you could do it, if we didn't think you could do it, then we wouldn't even bother. So, the expectations are, I would say, low in the aspect that the pressure that I put on them, but I think they have a very high ceiling. So, I think they should go far, but I don't necessarily put that weight on them because I think it's unreasonable, like we talked about. It's unreasonable to think that they could reach the level of play that I did. It's just now they may there's an opportunity, but I think it's unrealistic.
I'll probably finish up with one, and any of you guys could chime in and ask Chris as well, too, please. But my last question is just a hypothetical scenario. Because you
Mhm.
have invested a lot in tennis, and they pretty good. Like, your older one just played a top level national event, did great and everything. And so what if she came up to you and said, you know what, I just feel like my friends are running cross country and track, and I just want to run cross country and track, and I'm just gonna cut back on tennis and just do that. And I'm okay with just playing on a high school team, a middle school team.
No, I think the athlete in me would be a little heartbroken. I won't deny the fact that I'd be heartbroken because, I see they're so skilled, and it doesn't matter whether it was tennis or basketball or
Mhm.
soccer. I think they literally would be great at any sport. They
Mhm.
had success,
Mhm.
especially my youngest one. She just has success at every sport she touches. So, I'd be a little disappointed if they decided not to play sport at all. But if they decided not to play tennis, I think because of the time that they've spent developing the skill set, I would be a little deflated, but I'd be okay in the end, because I think they're going to be successful at whatever they do. So I get over it pretty quickly, but I would definitely, my wife would see me pouting, it'd be tough. I would try not to show it to them, but, no, I would be deflated.
Yeah, no, I mean that's my biggest fear, and I think we talked about it before. I think Linda was on too. Isn't actually that they won't have success. My biggest fear is that they'll stop playing. That's
Yeah,
my biggest fear. So
yeah,
everything right now is actually to just try to help them enjoy and get better, but not stop playing.
yes, yes. I think you can actually push a kid. You can literally push a kid out of a sport, and I think
Oh
I
yeah,
would be deflated, if they just didn't want to play anymore because they were deterred.
yeah,
But if they just decided, you know what, I want to do something else, that's a different story. But to push them out of the sport and they just feel deflated because they didn't have any success, I don't want that for any kid.
yeah. It's very easy to get excited. So just the word of the caution for everyone. Like if you're excited, you may not realize, but the kids sense a little bit. So
They
Linda,
do.
I want to ask you, Linda, to finish up because you write on this stuff. Can you share again what you're doing some work in this area, and I just want to finish up with that. And if any of you have a question also for Chris, put him on the spot. Feel free. We'll wrap up here in just a couple minutes.
Well, so I've written a book on youth sports and the culture of, how we've gotten things mixed up and confused so that youth sports have become serious and professionalized and adult driven rather than child centric and fun, all the stuff we're talking about. And included the reasons for how we got here, part of that is the money, the changing view that parents have towards kids, and like this, for a lot of reasons, parents now view their kids sort of differently, and the college environment, which is so fraught, just increasingly fraught, and then how this has kind of warped youth sports and eroded what we've, I think, historically, like to think they're for, which is to develop skills and be physically active and have friendships and all those, those wonderful things that sports do. And then the final section of the book is on what we can do about it. And one of those sections is about like sort of government efforts to turn this around. And there have been some, and most recently, so I wrote my book a year and a half ago. And in the last 6 months or so, I've been working with the Aspen Institute's Sports and Society program, looking at models. It sounds incredibly dull, and it had its moments of intense boredom, but it is important, and it is models for governance of youth sports at the state and local level. So in other words, what are state governments doing to repair some of these problems? What are local governments doing? And there's actually a lot going on. It's kind of encouraging. In terms of safety issues, you spoke about the ambulances, Chris. Some states are now legislating that have to be ambulances at every practice, every game. Maybe that's post-COVID after they declined. But, there is I think, particularly in light of COVID, which really dramatized, it made very clear how screwed up the youth sports system is, where some kids were just carrying on with their travel stuff and other kids couldn't do anything. I think there really has been some movement forward in terms of getting state attention to getting resources to kids who are in those sports deserts. And You know, the other side, the early specialization side, I think there's less attention on that because people think of that as the parents' concern. You know, the parents have to be smart enough to not put their kids in playing year round when they're 6 years old. But there is movement in government circles about providing more access.
Yeah, so that's great. Actually, Tom Ferry is a good friend of mine, and I have consulted with him for
Oh,
gosh,
yeah.
since he
Mhm.
started and done a lot with him. I just hadn't gone. He spoke at a meeting a year ago, in fact. But yes, I've done a lot of project play stuff. So,
Yeah.
and it is important actually. The reason is because we're the only country, just so you know, out of all
Mhm.
modern countries that doesn't have a sports ministry.
Mhm.
So, we are, just my colleague, my friend and colleague is the chief medical officer for the U.S. Olympic Committee and also the lead physical therapist, and it's all privately funded. It's all through sponsorship. It's really scary to think that all of our Olympic stuff is actually through private foundation donors and all these things to fund so much of everything that we do, but yet every other country has a sports ministry, and then they have set regulations and guidelines to get every kid, like in the Netherlands, every kid is kind of like Geetha's model. Every kid does that. I have friends that are South African. They said they don't even play with shoes until they're 12. They play all the time. They just play in the field. They actually, one of a good friend is he's Chris Eubanks. You guys might know. He made the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. Over his coach is South African. And he's really a great guy. And he said, yeah, we didn't play with shoes until we were 12. So much less specialized or anything. We just went, like we didn't think. And he played professional tennis. Like it's not like they don't end up somewhere good. So they just think this is just insane. What are we
It
doing?
is.
I mean, they started with shoes at 12.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, Lakshmi, yeah.
Yeah, I guess just to kind of wrap up, if you had to answer the question, like the topic of this conversation of when to flip the switch from just being a young athlete to an elite athlete, what would that answer be in like a sentence or two? Like when do you flip that switch of like going all in? And it's not a time like an age, it could be, mindset or
This for everyone? Everyone
yeah,
asking?
no, mostly for you, but we can go around if everyone wants to talk about it, but mostly for
But
you. Yeah.
I think it really starts for me with the things that are unmeasurable. I think you have to and this is in no order. I think self-determination. I think you have to be very clear. You have to have clarity about what it is you want to accomplish. I think you have to be courageous. I think you have to, you know, not you have to be willing to fail. Literally not caring. I think that is just, children are so scared to fail. Just try. You're gonna fail more than you succeed, and it's okay. That's the discovery. And I think all of those things, if we just put them in a box, I think it would show itself as passion. I think so. If those are 4 or 5 things I could think of, that's where it starts. Once you're there, I think you have an opportunity to really sort of take it up a notch. But if you aren't showing those things, exhibiting those things, then we're talking elite. We're talking the best of the best, measuring whether it's I'm trying to think of the tennis player. She was the youngest of it. It wasn't Celis. Who was it, Doc? It was the lady.
Jennifer, I mean everyone, Jennifer Capriati or
Jennifer Capriati, right? Let's take her as an example, right? She was, at 14 years old, she was the best in the world, right? You could measure that. That was quantifiable. And I think she had to exhibit all of those, innate things, right, before she could really take off. And I think, if you can measure yourself, right, you have data that says, hey, this is what I'm doing, and this is what the best in the world do. That's when we're talking elite, in my opinion. And it doesn't matter what age. Some people get there, a lot sooner than others. Some people still end up getting there late. So that's my take on it.
Good answer.
yeah. Anyone else want to define it before we go? When do you went? I know Andrew's like, I'm ready for my 4-year-old to get going.
I would say the right time is when the child decides it's the right time. because it can't come from the parents. It has to be when, and it, Chris, is to your point. It's like when they have the passion and the
Yes,
enthusiasm and the drive, it's
That's-
their decision. It's not,
their decisions, correct. You're so correct. That's what I forgot. Is it their decision? They have to decide, but they got to be exhibiting those things before
yeah.
you can ask the question.
Yep. Yes. I mean, I think we're all in agreement here on that. So we just have to keep working on getting that message out and getting more parents on the same page, which is an uphill task. But
Yeah, it's gonna take a little.
sorry, you were going to say something?
No, you're right. It's going to take a
Yeah.
little work to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. I know it's a